Corporate Board Member presents an informational webcast. On this edition, Liability in the Boardroom with T.K. Kerstetter, President of Corporate Board Member, Chandra Reddy Metzler, President U.S.-Canada Financial Lines Chartis, and Bill Steers, President Gunn Steers and Company.
Welcome to this informational webcast. I'm T.K. Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and it's my pleasure to welcome you when we look into an important topic today, which is going to be liability in the boardroom, and most specifically, we're going to look at cyber liability. Now, we all know that with the advent of technology and social media and all the things that are happening, that cyber risk is growing. And where it once might have been sort of regulated to the IT space, it has now certainly become a risk for management and the board. And joining me to talk about this interesting topic is Chandra Reddy Metzler, who's the president of U.S.-Canada Financial Lines of Chartis. Welcome, Chandra.
Thank you. And
to my immediate left is Bill Steers, who's president of Gunn Steers and Company, who is an insurance broker. Bill, welcome.
Thank you.
So both of you are sort of constitute the leaders in this D&O industry from the carrier's perspective and from the broker's perspective. So I'm sure you really have a whole lot of overlap with this boardroom liability issues these days. So Chandra, we're going to start with you. You're one of the leading providers, if not the leading provider of D&O insurance. So what trends are you seeing sort of in the boardroom these days?
Thanks, TK. It's been, look, at Chartis, we're always trying to find ways to help our customers and find new innovative ways to interact with them. And lately, when we've been talking to them about the things that keep them up at night, we tend to hear three of the same resounding themes. One, there's a lot of concern around investigations, be it informal or formal. It's not a surprise with the advent of Dodd-Frank that this has become more and more of a concern lately. The second area where we get a lot of inquiry as of late has been with regard to network security and privacy or cyber issues, and that as you highlighted in your opening remarks, is no surprise, given the transformation of that space over the last 10 years. And what's interesting is that network security and privacy is an issue that's been around for a long time. It's a coverage that's been available for a long time, but it's really only as of late, as it's been hitting the press more and more often, that we've seen more inquiry, not surprisingly. And the third area where we have been also getting a lot of inquiry, and it's not a surprise when you think about the risk of an investigation, a very public one, and all of the news that we've seen lately about cyber breaches, is the impact that these kinds of events can have on a company's reputation. So reputational risk is another area where we've been seeing a lot of concern from our clients, and have been asked to think of ways to address it with some sort of insurance solution.
Yeah, reputational risk is not something you would think of initially, but it's a huge issue when you look that all these things translate into news ends up on the front page, okay, of newspapers, and all of a sudden your brand takes a reputational hit, and the directors have that risk from shareholders at that point. So, But let me move to the cyber part of that, because really when you think about what is growing exponentially, okay, it is the cyber risk, okay? It is related to digital and technology, and all that we rely on to keep our business running is now under risk. So that has moved right up as a key risk in the boardroom.
Oh yeah, and it's obviously we understand what the risk is, but it's also become an area of focus and concern in a regulatory sense as well, right? So you now have 46 states that require notification in the case of a data breach. Massachusetts passed a pretty sweeping comprehensive law where anyone doing business in the state has to be able to protect the data of the state's residents, right? And because almost every business can say that they do some element of business with someone in Massachusetts. It's now become the standard for almost all 50 states. We've seen this issue be taken up at the federal level, and we know that both houses of Congress as well as the executive branch have been thinking about ways to address this idea of systemic cyber risk.
Bill, you work with companies and clients every day, around their risk, and I'm sure you're hearing a lot about cyber risks as well. How would you conclude that the trends out there from your perspective?
Well, I would clearly agree that it is definitely one of the top priorities of the board. However, interestingly enough, in the past, it's always been a concern of the IT departments, but certainly since the October SEC disclosure notice, it's now been kicked up to the board and is definitely, again, on the forefront of the board meetings. So now the board has the responsibility of looking at two things. One, the risk management, internal risk management. How are we going to put together a world-class risk management program to thwart any sort of cyber attack? Once they put that, hopefully world-class or best-in-class program into place, it's then their next priority is to focus in on the insurance. And when they do that, they should be looking at certain coverages. And the lead ones are like data breach, where the computers are infiltrated by a hacker and data is stolen. The second one would be first-party coverage, where the company incurs business interruption. And then third, and probably equally as important, is the civil liabilities that they are exposed to, shareholder liabilities. They were all third-party lawsuits. And I think one of the biggest concerns with the board is that any sort of alleged breach of their oversight in any one of these two topics, the risk management and the insurance, could definitely lead to shareholder derivative lawsuits, without a doubt. And to sort of put it in perspective numbers-wise, recently Symantec and Ponemon Institute did a study, and the average cost to a company for a data breach alone is over $7 million. And they also determined that per record, it's about $214 per data breach. Then you add on to that the potential of the business interruption to the company, as well as the third-party lawsuits. The expenses could go up to the roof.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of companies out there that wish that their expense was limited to $7 million. That would probably be cheap for a lot of the companies in the disruption. Mm-hmm. But we've sort of danced around all the risks and stuff. What can we offer? And you touched on coverages, but mm-hmm. what really should somebody be doing from the coverage perspective in this? Because I'd hate to go off air without getting to the heart of this issue.
Correct. And fortunately, the good news is there are a lot of quality insurance companies out there that have terrific products that are providing cyber liability insurance. From a board perspective, we would strongly recommend when they are out there visiting, looking to secure coverage, they should focus their attention on regulatory notification expenses, something that Chandra brought up a few moments ago. A lot of states and now the federal government are getting involved in obligating themselves to obligating the company to notify when there is a data breach. And then there's other issues such as credit monitoring expenses that they might have to offer to their customers. Or the next one would be crisis management expenses. Data forensic expenses is a huge one because it's a big expense to try to figure out where the intrusion came from. And then finally, the last two items, which are more company related, is the first party business interruption, where they lose a lot of revenue if it happens to be a retail company, or for that matter, all the expenses related to getting back online, so to speak. And then finally, the shareholder lawsuits or the civil lawsuits or the regulatory lawsuits and all the allegations relating to potential breach of fiduciary duty by the board.
Well, Chandra, Chartis has always been known for its innovative look into products and what it can develop to deal with this. I can remember through the years, as these things crop up, you could always count on Chartis sort of looking innovatively. You guys have won awards, relative to this. So what innovative, what things are in the works, or what can you share, or what should people be aware of that might be of interest,
Well, I think as Bill was just mentioning, I think with regard, the interesting thing to me about network security and privacy coverage is it's not new. It's been around for over a decade, but it's only been recently that we've begun to see actual claims roll in, right? So, we can point to very public instances like the TJ Maxx case, like the Sony breach, where the risks are on the front page, and it's just highlighting for everyone what an important risk that this is to someone's business. And then so there's this need clearly that's being more and more awareness around it, and I think that's why, while it's not new, it's getting a lot of attention. One area, we talked about reputational risk earlier, and you said it's not something that you would think that's it's not a surprise that it's on the minds of people in the boardroom, but we've actually recently came up with an innovation in insurance to actually cover a company's reputational risk with a new product called Reputation Guard. And the idea behind that is that if you were to have a incident that you think even before it gets out into the mainstream news, that could impact your brand, right? That could impact the reputation that you've so painstakingly developed for your company, that this would be first-party triggered coverage so that you would have access to two world-class public relation firms to help you manage that incident. So that's the idea behind trying to find a way to help companies when there's a reputational incident at hand, right? So it's both, providing the resources to pay for that actual, the PR that goes with it, and actually providing access to PR funds. So it's an interesting product that we have because it includes the role of the consultant in that. So for a smaller company without their own PR department, this would be a neat solution to that problem.
That is very interesting, and as we know, we hear about the big companies, but it's the mid-cap and the small companies that sometimes really need the help, because they don't have that expert risk officer, or they don't have the expertise in-house to deal with a lot of the catastrophes or crises that affect them.
Sure.
Well, one thing we know for sure, if cyber risk is this big this year, next year it's probably going to be this big, because that's just growing in the way that there are susceptible parts of one's business that are going to come under attack. So,
absolutely.
Well, listen, we want to thank you for being part of this informational webinar. And we hope that the audience, too, found this helpful. And watch for informational webinars in the future where we'll try and bring you more information to help you as a board member and as a committee member. So thanks for joining us.
Chandra Reddy Metzler can be reached at chandra.metzler@chartisinsurance.com. Bill Steers at billsteers@gunsteers.com. This has been a presentation of Corporate Board Member, an NYSE Euronext company.